Created live on Fireside.
Welcome, I'm Lorilee Binstock, and this is a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast. Thank you so much for joining me live on Fireside Chat, where you can be a part of the conversation as my virtual audience. I am your host, Lorilee Binstock. Everyone has an opportunity to ask me or our guests questions by requesting to hop on stage or sending a message in the chat box. I will try to get to you as soon as I can, but I do ask that everybody be respectful. Today's guest is Corinne Coppola, mental health coach, IFS practitioner, trauma recovery specialist, and founder of R.E.S.T Retreats. Corinne, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome, Lorilee. My pleasure. And it's just to let you know, the pronunciation is Corinne Coppola.
Corinne Coppola. Thank you so much for correcting me, because I probably would have called you Corinne the whole time. So thank you so much.
No problem.
Well, first of all, I want to talk about your journey to get you to where you are now. Really, what made you want to work as a mental health coach?
It's a really good question. I never thought I'd wind up here, for sure. When I was a little girl, I told my parents that I wanted to be a counselor. You know, back then it was called counselor, not therapist. And they said, well, you're not going to earn any money doing that. You better go into business. So that's what I did at the time. And then I found my way, you know, I was in the business world for a number of years, worked for nonprofit, for-profit, have my master's in organization development, and then discovered yoga and mindfulness as a practice to help ground me, keep me steady. I had 3 young children at the time, and I thought, wow, this is really a way that I can help service people and help them, because it helped, those practices really helped me so much. And then I started teaching. And then I worked for a nonprofit bringing mindfulness into the schools. And I started working on retreats and things just, and then I was brought to a practice called Internal Family Systems. And I thought, wow, this is really phenomenal and powerful for me in my own healing journey. And I thought, I really want to be able to do this with people so that they can also rewrite their past. And that's how I got to where I am. That being said, there's also, you know, some trauma throughout my childhood and my adult life that came to play into being motivated to heal, you know. And that's how now I am working with people in one-on-one and small groups and leading retreats. And I could not be more in alignment and more grateful and happy. So
that's so wonderful. You know, it's interesting. You know, you were working in a traditional setting, even though you were you know, empowered by mindfulness. But was it the trauma that actually had you move towards, you know, being this founder of these retreats and all of this, and even trauma recovery? I know that you are a specialist. Was there something that clicked where you said, this is what I want to go this route to help people recover from trauma?
Yeah, that is such a great question, Lorilee. And we'll be piecing it together by your great questions. So yes, the answer is yes. Well, when I first started taking yoga, I belonged to a gym, and one of my girlfriends was like, oh, you've got to come to this 8 a.m. Sunday class. I'm like, no, that is my morning. No, that won't be happening. And the other side of that, actually, when I began my yoga journey, my oldest daughter was only about 2 years old, 18 months to 2 years. And I was working part-time, finishing my master's part-time. And one of my friends had said, you really got to try a yoga class. I'm like, okay, what else? And was for those of you familiar with yoga, Shavasana is the final relaxation pose. And when I went into Shavasana, I felt like I was home. I was like, wow, this is pretty powerful. But then I had my second child and I had a difficult birth. So like, I wasn't, it wasn't then what it is now, because he's 22, my daughter's 24, and I have another son who's 20. 20 years ago, there wasn't the knowledge that prenatal yoga was okay for women who had complications. So then fast forward to my youngest being 3, and my girlfriend invited me to this class at the gym, and she was a phenomenal instructor. Finally, I went. She was a phenomenal instructor, and I thought, okay, I've got to get back to yoga in a serious way. So found a studio that was close to my house and that I had originally gone to years before, and started to do additional classes there. And while there, I was volunteering at the front desk. And there was a book by a woman by the name of Maya Tuari. And it was about how she healed herself from like stage 4 cancer through Ayurvedic practices that were in her background. But she had been a go, fashion designer in New York. And it was called A Path of Practice. And I was just fascinated by that. And one day I was in a group setting. I was in a trauma recovery group, myself as a participant, for sexual abuse I had experienced from a close family member. And I hadn't had those memories until I was 40. I am now 56. So I thought to myself, when I was in that group, it just came to me like, oh, this is how yoga has been so healing for me. I have to bring these practices to women and children, And from there, it was David Emerson and Bessel van der Kolk. I think I was in their second cohort up at Kripalu for trauma for, yoga for trauma. And my journey sort of just started to unravel from there. I went myself on a retreat for women survivors of sexual violence. And then they invited me back the next year to co-lead. So I co-led that retreat for 10 years. And it was so powerful for me to see the transformation that could happen in 2.5 days. And by being in nature, by being in play, we weren't talking about our stories, right? We were in our bodies. There was movement, light yoga, some drumming, some meditation, just really back to being a kid. And so then in my journey, I, unfortunately, when my daughter was 14, so this was 10 years ago, there was a suicide cluster at her high school. And I thought to myself, I can't just sit on the sidelines with this. And knowing how these somatic practices can really help, I was able to partner with a organization that was just blossoming. This was 2013. And, I said to them, we have to bring these practices to the schools in Northern Virginia, which is where I was living at the time. And it sort of came from that. And I worked with them for 4 years. We got the school board involved. We had a lot of high schools, hundreds and then into the thousands of young people and adults, the teachers and the parents. And from there, started to co-lead and manage retreats for teens and then also adults. And now here I am. So yeah, it's just sort of like following the next best thing, right? The next best that, like, I did not have like the super plan vision. And at the same time, like, I didn't have a path, but I had a vision. Okay. So like, I knew 9, 10 years ago when I was in Costa Rica, I want to lead a retreat back here in Costa Rica. And this March, I'm leading a retreat, my first retreat in Costa Rica. So I would really, for me, it's just been following the breadcrumbs, and with the intention to serve, like, how can I use my gifts to serve? And in the same time, make a living. So that's a long answer to your short question.
No, I love it. Thank you so much. I love what you're talking about when you talk about your experience in this retreat. It was just play. It was, you were in your body, you weren't in your head. Is that what your rest retreats are? Could you talk a little bit about that? It's an acronym, right?
Right. It's an acronym. So the R is for relax. The X is for the E, the E is for examine. The S is for surrender. And the T stands for transformation. So these retreats that I guide people on are different than the survivor retreats that I did. There are elements in this retreat. And I also give one-on-one VIP retreats out in Chincoteague, Virginia, where I live part-time on the Eastern Shore. And so the rest will be the first 2 days, as people sort of enter. We're doing relaxation, integration, arriving. The second day, I have a healer who's going to do a beautiful sound journey for us. Then day 3, 3 and 4, we get into examine, right? What patterns, because the retreat is called Healing the Heart. So what patterns have arisen in which I am not living to the full potential of who I can be in this world, right? It's sort of beginning to what's called excavating the heart. So practices like each day will be themed out. So for example, covered in compassion, right? Love and letting go. So we have to let go of some things in order and have compassion for ourselves and the others so that we can be on this continuum of healing. Then, the surrender, I have a surprise planned, but we also have a magnificent breath worker that will be leading us in a workshop, in terms of letting go. There'll be journaling, there'll be arts and crafts tables, there'll be walks in nature. And then we get to T, right? The S is surrender, where we're letting go. And I'm just going to say we have a musician coming in to really help us let go on all levels. We'll be doing sunset walks, fire circle, and then the T is for transformation. And the last 2 days, the last day is a cacao ceremony with a woman psychologist who I met last year who was down there, and she's from Costa Rica, and just this beautiful healing heart 3-hour ceremony that we'll be having. And I'm keeping it small intentionally, 11 spots with some women who are really just phenomenal and are there to do some deep work. It's not therapy. It's not, that's not what my intention is. It's really to create this safe community, safe, sacred community that women can show up as their best selves, like all of their parts that have been forgotten. Like, who was I when I was 6, 7, 8 years old and I was magic, and who took away that magic? Like, let me reconnect with that spirit, that sacredness inside, so that I can then bring these practices into my life and live in a way that is in alignment with who I want to be and who I am.
Wow. You talked about IFS, and I hear you talking about parts. I have a lot of respect for IFS. I'm actually in IFS therapy every week. Um, do you bring that to your rest retreats?
So it depends on what the client wants, right? So for the one-on-one, yes, absolutely. For the small group retreats, this is not, IFS is not the focus. However, I can't not do it, meaning that, that's who I am is, speaking in, like, some of the journaling questions will be internal family systems based, but it's not as if we're going to be having therapeutic sharing circles, right? That we're going to be doing parts work. That's another type of retreat that I host. So, there will be parts work. And at the same time, it's not going to be group therapy. People are there also to, like, what's really important to me is the 4 or 5 hours of quiet time that we'll have every afternoon. So if you want to sit by the pool and be quiet, that's awesome. Go to your room, take a nap. You want to go on excursions, to go kayaking, horseback riding, surf lessons, you go do it. Zip lining, so that people can really customize this experience to what they feel they want and need. So that, everything is optional. That's really, really important to me, is to give everyone choice,
Wow.
because we're all adults, and oftentimes in life we feel like we don't have choices. I mean, that's for me. I should only
No, I
speak for
feel that
myself.
too. I feel that too. I feel last week I actually got in a ski accident, and I feel like I could have I have choices to say I need to rest. This was before the accident, because my life was just jam-packed with so much stuff and trying to catch up from the end of last year, from the holidays. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need a break. But I just felt like I couldn't get a break until I literally got in a little skiing accident. And all of a sudden I was in bed for a week, and I was like, I really feel like the universe is listening to me. But yes, it was really, there are times where I'm like, I feel like I'm an adult and I don't have a choice. Like, I have to cook dinner. I have to, I have to do all these things. So it's nice. I've looked at your retreats and I'm like, oh, this would be amazing for me. Unfortunately, my husband will be leaving to go out of the country during that time, so I have to be with my children. But I am looking forward to going to one of your retreats.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your skiing accident.
It's really funny because I literally was telling my IFS practitioner the week before, I'm like, I just feel like I need a break. I need a break. I can't. I feel like I keep going, 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 and I feel guilty. I would feel guilty if I was like, I'm going to be in bed. The thing is, the universe heard me and was like, okay, we'll do this. And my leg wasn't hurting when I was resting, but it was hurting when I was walking. So, or attempting to. So I felt like, it's one of those things. You need a break. People need breaks. And sometimes it'll be a forced one. And sometimes it's going to come at the most inopportune times. And I think what I've learned through my healing journey is that, everything kind of happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. There's signs and signals that are telling us, it's time to rest. And it's our choice to listen and not listen.
Right. I love that. Like, oftentimes I'll say to my clients, and not only my clients, but, in general, it just comes out of my mouth. Like, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. That really helps me when I'm in a funk, when I am feeling like, really? This is really what's happening? Oh, right. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And then the gratitude practice. I mean, I am a huge, huge believer of how, and science proves it, but of how gratitude has really changed my life.
Mm.
The thing that it most importantly has led me to is the characteristic of acceptance.
Yeah.
Like, how can I be really thankful for the turmoil that's happening right now in my life, or in a relationship? And then maybe not at that moment, I'm not able to see the good in it, but still I'm being thankful for it, because then usually it is revealed to me that, I am able to see what, just like what you said, what the purpose. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
this was leading me to more forgiveness. Okay.
It's so funny how long it took me to figure that out. It took me
Mm-hmm.
so long, because people would be like, "You just be grateful." I would have those to-do lists, like those like padded to-do list papers that says like, here's a little checkbox, and here write what you have to do. And at the top of the page it would say, "I am grateful for blank." And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." And I would never write it in. I would just write my list. And I'm like, I never understood the power of gratitude. And it's also interesting because when I think about, earlier in our conversation, you talked about shavasana, the corpse
Mm-hmm.
pose, when you
Mm-hmm.
found some transformation and epiphany in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Before I went into treatment, before I was, went to residential treatment and I would do yoga, I thought I did yoga for, you know, the lengthening and strengthening, and
Mm-hmm.
flexibility. And when we would get into shavasana pose, I would literally sit there and think about, okay, so what are the things I need to do today? And I never
Mm-hmm.
understood the importance of shavasana, because when I went to treatment, it was like I learned this whole idea that shavasana is where you're integrating your practice. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
really? And
Mm-hmm.
that changed
Mm-hmm.
my life. It's funny the things that people tell you, because people are like, oh, shavasana is important. I'm like, oh yeah, rest is important, sure, whatever. And then you move on, you do your thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
you realize, like, it just took me so long to really absorb the practice of rest, the practice of
Mm-hmm.
gratitude. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm telling you, that really changed everything for me, at
Yeah,
least.
yeah, I hear you. You're preaching to the choir, because, when I did used to teach public and private yoga classes, I would say Shavasana is the most important pose. And it's also something that you can take at any time, and it's something that we don't do, like, and
Hmm.
oftentimes that's what happens, is we're resting, and then everything floats to the surface. So when people come on meditation retreats, it's like, what they call sloth happens, because people start falling asleep the first, day or two, because they realize how tired their body is.
Hmm.
That it's like the head nod, and people can't stay awake. And that's just like a normal, part of what happens, is like, oh, this is what happens when I dial it down. And there's an author and speaker, her name is Sandra Dalton Smith. I don't know if she's got a book called Sacred Rest. And she identifies 7 different types of rest, which I can't rattle off the top of my head right now.
Hmm.
But I just think that is such an interesting perspective to look at. Oh, oftentimes we just feel rest is like the physical, but there's also emotional rest, social rest,
Mm.
all these different types of rest that we need. Like, sometimes social rest means interacting with others. Sometimes social rest means, oh, I need to pull back, and it's not just, as it's not just what oftentimes, like, spa days, and no. It can be, for me, one of my rest practices is between 3 and 4 o'clock every day. I don't schedule calls or meetings or anything between 3 and 4, so that maybe it is used to respond to emails, but there's usually at least a 10-minute window that I have for myself that I have to go meditate or pray, or that I do put my head down on a pillow, because that completely refreshes us. And something that I learned that you might already know is that at 3 o'clock, like middle afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock, our cortisol levels lower. And
I did not know
this
that.
whole practice that I started over the pandemic. I was noticing that, oh, I'm pretty tired right now. And 3 or 4 o'clock was the time when my second day began, right? That I would work until 3 or 4, and then I'd go pick the kids up from school, take them to different activities, go, 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 go. And then when that didn't happen during the pandemic, I was able to listen to my body, and I was like, oh, isn't this interesting? You know? So
Wow.
that's how it sort of came up for me. It's not like, oh, let me do this. It was me listening to my body.
Yes, absolutely. It's so hard to listen to your body when there's so many things going on. So yes, I think that quiet time, that meditation time is the time for, to really be able to listen to what's happening there. I do want to ask, what does it take to truly achieve transformation?
First of all, that is a great question. I would retract the word achieve. And so what does it take to achieve transformation? Because that then makes it a goal, right? Which we all want. Like, we all want this different life. Like, right before this call, I happened to be at a yoga class, and the teacher was just phenomenal. And I said to her, you need to be teaching in Costa Rica. And I didn't know that she was head of the teacher training program at the studio, blah, 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 blah. She's like, well, I have my kids and da, da, da. And I thought, yeah, but you could maybe go guest teach, to myself. And like, what could the possibilities be? So I think one of the first things, we have to get out of our own way. And when I say we have to get out of our own way, people talk all the time about like letting go of limiting beliefs. And I'm going to flip that on the head maybe, and maybe open yourself to a possibility, and open yourself to the possibility of, what do I really enjoy doing? Maybe it's baking cookies, and you start baking cookies a little bit more and giving them away. And then all of a sudden you have a cookie business. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just really asking yourself the question, if I didn't have to be perfect at, I would like to blank, right? If I didn't need to be perfect, what is one thing that really lights me up? What is the one thing? And it might be, and it's at this moment, like, I didn't know when I started on this path, like when I started taking yoga again, that I would someday be an internal family systems practitioner, mental health coach, and running retreats. Like, I didn't have that vision. I just knew that taking yoga and then maybe teaching yoga, because what I did in the past, part of my job was presentations, and I worked in organization development, and I trained people on performance management, and I trained people on career consulting, so, and leadership development. And so I knew that I loved getting up in front of groups. I had no problem doing that. And then the passion that I had for yoga, because of how it was healing me and it was allowing me to be in my body, wow, I wanted to bring that to everybody. So then I, got into a teacher training, and the teacher training back then was like, 2 years long, every other weekend. I did 300 hours. So went out to Montana. So that's what I would say is the first step is just to, like, be open, sit quietly and say, what does really light me up? Oh, do I really love playing pickleball? I mean, what do I love doing? Do I love gathering people? Maybe you love cooking and you want to have a vegan cooking club. Like, I'm not making this up. What is it that lights you on fire? And then follow that. So that's the first thing that I would say. And then the second thing is acceptance. Like, so that you're open and accepting of whatever is happening in that moment. Like, I went through a lot of suffering and I still go through suffering. It's not like, oh, I'm happy go lucky. And it happens to be a great day today. I'm blessed enough to be on this call with you. I went to yoga class. I walked the dogs. I did some work before all of that. But it's having this theme of gratitude. And when you're grateful throughout the day, and then you're more accepting of, okay, well, my my child snarked at me, or my partner, made a really inappropriate comment. Like, what am I doing to accept what is happening so that I don't have to be in suffering? And suffering happens when we want things to be different than they are. And I'm here to tell you, like, there was a day when I was going through my divorce that I had $260 in my checking account. And I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So I could sit there and I could complain and I could think of all the ways that this wasn't fair, or I could be grateful, go for a walk, shift my perspective. I have a house, my kids are healthy, I have food in my cupboard that I can make for dinner. And it's not always going to be this way. Like, the two words that are helpful for transformation, I feel, are for now. This is only happening for now. Good, bad, in between, So those are that's how I think I would, answer your question, is more around like acceptance, being with what is, acceptance, and then, for now. And knowing what lights you up, what are you passionate about? And it's not as if I was doing what I'm doing now. It's not like I woke up out of bed and was like, oh, I'm going to run retreats in Costa Rica. No, it didn't happen that way. It's taken me 10 years, right? So anyway.
Wow. Is this what you hope for your clients after they leave your retreats?
Absolutely. That, and that has happened. And even, just in when I work with clients one-on-one, it can be so powerful. Like, I had a client this past week that she's had a lot of grief in her life. 3 of her brothers passed away while she was growing up. I mean, it's just really heartbreaking. And when she came into connection with her grief, and it felt like these cotton balls in her chest, and that it was, just all of her heartbreaks, and she was able to turn towards that and have compassion for it. She is now much more open and loving in her relationship with her partner, because she had feared being in an intimate relationship because of all the grief and loss she's had in her life. And she's also a young widow. She was a young widow. So, it's really about giving people hope, that you're hopeful about the future, that there is a purpose to my life, and that I can start over. And a couple of my clients that have been to one-on-one retreats to me out in Chincoteague, they now are establishing really thriving businesses because of some, past things that they were able to let go of. So once you clear that out, right, it's the excavating of the heart. Once we clear that out, then it's like we can be open to the next thing. And at the same time, during those transitions, being open to the grief. Like, I'm an empty nester. And I thought I've been an empty nester since the fall of 2021. And I thought, okay, well, a year I'll be, on this little bit of a roller coaster emotionally. But, I got to tell you, the fall hit and of 2022, and that grief was there a little differently, but it was still there. So, just being with what is happening and accepting it and not pushing it away, right? It's really about turning towards the difficult stuff. And when we turn towards it and we can have compassion and we stop running from it, then we can understand what the message is, what that part is needing, what we're needing. So I can talk all day about this, obviously.
Oh, well, it's amazing what you're doing. And I do want to ask, how often do your retreats go? Do you have them?
This is the first week long that I'm doing, or 8 days, 7 nights. This is the first one I'm doing. All the other ones have been weekend retreats, 3 days, 2 nights. I'm planning on expanding this coming fall to doing them 4 days, 3 nights, and, partnering with different people. And after I do my one in Costa Rica and come back to the East Coast, I'm actually going to be going on a road trip. So I'll be focusing mostly for my online clientele and not doing any physical retreats until the fall of 2023.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great. I will be looking forward. Please keep me posted on those because
I
yeah,
will.
I want to hear more. Is there
For
anything
sure.
else you'd like to add?
That is such a great question. I would like to add, I might not do this justice, but the Mother Teresa quote, like even doing the smallest things with the greatest amount of love, that no matter where you are in your life right now, how can I show up with the most love for myself, for the others? Like, even if it's doing the laundry, like, can I do this in a loving way, in a grateful way? Just doing the smallest things with the greatest love, because it's really not that hard to be kind. And I just went to see A Man Named Otto last night, and it was just such a lovely movie in terms of like a testament to how small kindnesses can change a life and save a life.
Yeah.
So that's really what I would say, is just even in the smallest ways. Like, might sound corny, but right before you pick up the phone to make a call, that has to be potentially onerous, like a service call for an internet problem, right? Can you smile and send the person love on the other side, because they're doing the best they can too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Corinne, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you, Lorilee. It's been real deep honor for you to extend me your invitation and to have the opportunity to write an article for your magazine. I'm just so honored.
Well, I'm honored for you to join us. And am I saying your name right? Corinne Coppola?
Yes.
I got it.
You got it, Lorilee.
Well, thanks again. That was Corinne Coppola, mental health coach, IFS practitioner, trauma recovery specialist, and founder of R.E.S.T Retreats. For more information on Corinne, click on that scrolling fortune cookie right there in the middle of your screen. Also, January's issue of Authentic Insider is out, which Corinne has also contributed to, and where you can find that information on her retreats. And just check out Authentic Insider at traumasurvivorthriver.com. That's traumasurvivorthriver.com. February's issue of Authentic Insider is comes out tomorrow, actually. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my email list to get Authentic Insider magazine in your inbox monthly. Thank you again for joining me. Join me live next week on Fireside when I speak with Keisha Chanel, author, speaker, and healer. You've been listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Fireside. I'm Lorilee Binstock. Again, thank you for being a part of the conversation. Take care.